Now again this year, the Minnesota Chamber members will be asking questions of the leadership panel. I will be asking follow-up questions, and we are going to have the first of several questions tonight. Our first question from right here in front of me is related, and this is a first for the Minnesota Chamber, business taxes. Take it away.
Good evening. My name is Tracy Tapney, and I am the owner of Wyoming Machine, a precision sheet metal fabrication company located just north of here in Stacy. People are often surprised to learn that 92% of businesses in Minnesota pay their taxes through the personal tax return. With Minnesota having one of the highest tax rates in the nation, this can often be a burden on small and mid-sized business. So my question to you this evening is, would you support tax relief for pass-through income to small and mid-sized businesses?
All right, thank you very much, Tracy. Let's start with Senate Majority Leader Tom Bach. I know this was a part of the discussion when taxes were raised last year or a couple of years ago. What about that? There is that concern about some small business owners who end up having to pay this tax.
Well, thank you, Tom, and thank you for the question. I know a little something about that, having been the former tax chair of the Senate. But before I answer, let me just add my tribute to David Olson. He was a close friend. I never considered him partisan, but I will say, Tom, I don't understand why you're still here. I know David had a very good relationship with you, and I always thought that's why you were here. But David was somebody that I would.
You don't think he's still pulling the strings from up there?
When we got near the end of session, he almost always came to me and said, "Tom, let's go out and have dinner." And we would go out, and when we were in the majority, he would say, "Tom, how can I be helpful? How can we make a deal here and get the work of the state done?" And I just deeply appreciate that, and as the State Chamber looks for another leader, I wish you the best in finding the quality type person that David Olson was.
All right. Well said, well said. Now tell Dave something he'd like to hear.
On the issue of pass-through income, especially for S corporations that pay their income tax on their income tax, personal income tax return, the challenge in the legislature is one legislature can never bind another one. So we've got a new legislature this year that will reflect the public's priorities. Every dollar is put into competition, and tax cuts get put into competition because it's spending money just like other areas of the budget. And this legislature, like previous ones, will decide, is that the highest priority of the money that we have to spend, and what of those priorities that we consider and take public testimony on are going to be the things that move Minnesota forward. So I understand it. I understand also it's very, very expensive to do, and look forward to the conversation. I can tell you I'm absolutely willing to commit the Senate to do it if you're willing to help me replace the revenue. But to just do it and just spend money on it is really challenging because it's in competition with other priorities. I actually passed a tax bill in the Senate during the Plenty years that had it in it, because I do think it's helpful policy for the job creators. But if we could figure out how to replace the revenue so that it wasn't in competition with other spending priorities, I think it's probably the right tax policy.
And Senator Hand, that is the bugaboo all the time in a lot of these issues is, well, sure, we can do that, but how are you going to replace the revenue?
Well, I think I don't look at it quite that way. I think what we're really saying is, should people be allowed to keep the money that they earn and invest it in their business? And yes, and I think that it's not our money. You know, at the state level, we are trying to do good things for the people of the state, but we have to remember that a lot of businesses do a lot of good things for the people of the state as well. And if you take away the ability to reinvest what they earn, then you lose jobs, you lose productivity, you lose the ability to attract other businesses. So I appreciate the balancing of the budget and how that works, but this isn't about that. It's about how do you do things that make the economy work better. And so I think we ought to take this up and seriously deal with it.
And Speaker Dowd, Republicans newly in control of the Minnesota House, you could perhaps pass a tax bill that would have this provision in it, but then of course you got to work it out with the Senate Democrats and Governor Dayton. What do you plan to do? I know you're going to propose some bills coming up here tomorrow or the next day. Could this be among those things?
I have a distinct idea that you might see a little bit of this tomorrow morning when we roll out our first bills. So it is a problem, and I want to thank Tracy for the question. You know, we know that there is more than one way to raise revenue for the state of Minnesota, and we know that there are demands on that money. But the best way to do it is let's create more jobs, and not just more jobs, but more better paying jobs in Minnesota. And what we're going to end up doing if we do that is we're going to collect more income tax, and those folks are going to have more money in their pockets to pay more sales tax when they buy goods and services, which again helps the economy. That's the real answer. And you know what the great part about it is? That benefits everybody. Every Minnesota family and every Minnesota job creator. And we want to make sure that we're finding solutions that really do benefit everybody. We think that's the solution, and you're going to see a little bit more on this tomorrow morning.
And Representative Thiessen, it is one of those things that seems like to a lot of people a common sense measure, but again, there are realities like how do you replace the revenue? How will you approach this in the House?
Well, I think Tom gave an excellent answer, actually, and he's our tax guy on the Democratic side. But I would say, from my perspective, I get the argument here, and it's not just about the money that's going to be spent and has to be replaced, but it's also, if you look at it, if we're talking about tax relief, it's also thinking about what is the actual best way to provide tax relief. And is it this, or is it actually to provide tax relief to middle-class families, the folks that are working for the companies that are here, so that they can get that money into their pockets and spend it on the businesses that are here? So I think that, to me, is almost the bigger question. Is this the way to do it, or is it to actually get money directly into people's pockets in a way of tax relief? So that I guess is how I would perceive it, because business is important for Minnesota and important for Minnesota workers, but Minnesota workers are important for Minnesota business too, and we can't lose sight of both sides of that equation.
And another thing, Speaker Dowd, I'll come back to you, that sounds like common sense, is trying to do whatever you can to encourage entrepreneurship, business innovation in the state. Obviously, a lot of these start as small businesses, and we're talking about them now. As one of your priorities, do you have ways that you would like to find to encourage people to start new businesses in Minnesota and grow them, so we have some of these juggernaut companies that we have seen so often in Minnesota's history that start small and then become huge Fortune 500 companies?
Absolutely. I think we find, or we see examples every day, anecdotal examples of businesses that struggle because our permitting process is too long, or they have to go through so many levels of government to get something approved. We need to turn Minnesota into really the juggernaut, to borrow your term, but of job creation. And there's so many other states that really have learned that if we can make our tax climate and our regulatory climate more competitive, we'll start being a state that draws jobs in. And those states have figured that out. And right now, we're losing jobs to those states. And maybe not directly losing jobs, but we're losing opportunities when our own Minnesota companies, many of you, expand your businesses in other states. And that, to me, is just as big a loss as if we lose an actual job here. We have the best opportunity in the world here with the workforce that we have and the companies that we have here in Minnesota to really build that base. And what we need to do is grow Minnesota's economy. But in order to do that, we've got to be competitive. And that means taxes and our regulatory environment.
Senator Bach, are there specific things you could do, like R&D, tax credits, those types of things to encourage this type of development?
Well, I've learned over my time that tax policy by itself does not drive economic expansion. And I tell you, my first real experience with that was in 2002. Then Majority Leader Plenty, soon to be Governor Plenty, and I authored together the notion of tax-free zones. And we weren't successful. We couldn't get it even out of the Republican House at the time. And in 2003, when he became governor, he came to me and says, "You know, Tom, I'd like you to pick up that bill." So I authored it as the Senate author, and we passed it. And 12 years later, when the program expired, we found out it wasn't the solution. That Minnesota's economy did not grow, and there was a couple little pockets of places down at Albert Lee and some of the border communities where it provided some help. But overall, tax reductions, even a totally tax-free climate, no income tax, no sales tax, no property tax, did not lead to an economic expansion. So I think we need to get over this notion that somehow if we just cut taxes, Minnesota businesses will thrive. Minnesota is a relatively high tax state. We always have been. Minnesotans expect a lot from their government. It's part of the reason that we have the workforce that we have in this state, because our state government has invested, and our businesses have invested a lot of money in our workforce. And we have become very, very competitive, even in this hyper-competitive global economy. We're never going to compete on taxes because Minnesotans expect a lot. We're never going to compete on climate, right? Walk outside, it's pretty darn cold. We've got some disadvantages, but still we've become very successful. And we need to figure out what it is that's made us successful and work on those strengths. And I would argue, and you're going to see it tomorrow when the Senate starts to roll out what we think are important priorities for the session, investing in our workforce, investing with our employers on incumbent worker training, on the next generation of workers that replace all of us baby boomers going out the door. That's how Minnesota's businesses are going to compete, by making sure we have a workforce that's better than anybody else in this country and the world have.
Mr. Minority Leader, it might not be the biggest factor or the only factor in whether businesses start or expand in the state of Minnesota, but from business owners I talk to, it is very important. When it comes time to do their taxes, this is one of the things they complain about the most. Are there things that can be done, do you think, to help ease the burden a little bit?
Well, I would say when it comes time to do my taxes, I complain a lot, right?
Yes.
That's just how things go. But I also know that when you need a workforce that is going to be successful, when you need a transportation system that probably would, if we don't make the investments that Governor Dayton was talking about tonight, is going to be a bigger drag on our economic development, most certainly, than any tax relief that we could give this year. When you talk about investing in education and all the other priorities, making sure that we have a healthy workforce and that people are getting access to the health care that they need, you got to put all those priorities together. I have no doubt this year that we will, at the end of the day, see tax relief, and there's going to be tax relief that I would imagine is going to go to the folks in this room. But we have to do that in a way that prioritizes all of our other needs in the state, and that's the discussion I think that we'll be having over the next 5 months.
All right, and Senator Hand, you can weigh in on this.
Am I for taxes? Is that what the question is?
Yeah,
More tax-
what types of things can you do? I mean, could there be R&D, tax credits, anything to help businesses grow?
I think the bottom line is that we have to recognize that economic growth is the key to success in our state, no matter how you look at it. And I think we have to get over the idea that the only way you get economic growth is by spending more money at the state government level. I don't believe that works. I think we've got a lot of people in this room that hire a lot of people and provide opportunity for a lot of families, and they're productive, they're innovative, and we need more of it. And when we have a tax code that is not competitive with our neighbors, with the other states that are around the world, that doesn't help us. We need to be a magnet to get people to come to this state and invest. And I think our tax code needs to be revised, needs to be reformed to give that opportunity for people to come here and grow.